Hello and a warm welcome to everybody who's joined us today for this webinar shining a brighter light on income protection. My name's Vincent O'Connor and I'm a Senior Business Development Manager here at Royal London. So let's take a look at the agenda for this webinar today. First of all, we're going to take a look at the state of the income protection nation for 2019, and what we're going to do is delve into state benefits, what they currently look like at the moment, a possible solution, which is how we could use savings to fill the gap, and also we'll take a look at some customer attitudes and opinions. And some of this research comes from research that Royal London commissioned a few months ago, and the results are quite startling really in terms of what some of the general public told us. Then we're going to take a look at illustrating the chance of a protection claim. I think one of the big components that needs to be in your sales process is to have that conversation about the chance and probability of actually making a protection claim. We'll look at 5 simple steps to sell income protection. This is a very simple process that you can follow to help you have that conversation with your clients and help them understand what income protection is and help them to want to buy it. And finally, we'll talk about a Royal London idea, which is how to design an income protection solution, albeit on a tight budget. And in fact, what you're going to see later is the budget we're talking about really is tight. At face value, you might think this can't be done. But we're going to look at real quotes that we've just done recently in the run-up to this webinar today. Now, this webinar does qualify for CPD, so we do have some learning objectives, and these are on the screen at the moment. That's to have an awareness of what happens when people go off work sick and why losing income can cause extra problems, understand the latest levels of state benefits that can be claimed in the event of sickness or incapacity for this current tax year, to be able to illustrate protection risks for your clients based on their own individual circumstances. I know many of you are already doing this, but I just want to refresh and put that idea out there about how simple it is to have that conversation about probability and the chance of claim, and it will help the client choose what's most important to them. That 5-step sales process that we just talked about, and finally, as I say, how Royal London can help and support you. So without any further ado, let's take a look at the state of the nation and what happens when people go off work sick. Now, this was a statistic from the government and the Office of National Statistics. In 2016, people in the UK took 137.3 million days off work. And that stat is almost so difficult to understand and comprehend. It's such a big number. Now, if we break this down, what we do know is that some of those days that were taken off work sick were actually very minor. It may well have been that some of these people weren't even sick in the first place. It might have been a hangover. Sometimes, though, the sickness was more serious. And what we also know is that some people stay off work for long periods of time. And actually, some people never go back to work ever again. And this is a spectrum of different events that happen to people. What we do know to be true is a lot of working days are lost each year. Now, we're going to use this figure as a benchmark, some of the examples I'm going to talk about today. The latest figure that we have about the average full-time income in 2018, that was £29,588. So we're going to round this up to £30,000 in some of my examples. If we look at £30,000 as take-home pay, that looks like £1,995 a month or £460 a week. And the question we need to ask is what's going to happen to people and their families when they lose their income because they can't work. I call it the vicious circle, and this is the problem. The problem is that we can't stop people from going off work sick. That's an eventuality that's out of our control. And what happens when people go off work sick? Very often there's a point in time at which they lose their income. And when they lose their income, they still have bills to pay. Those direct debits still need to go out. But the person who's off work sick needs time to recover. But having those mounting financial bills that need to be paid causes financial stress, and very often people return to work too early. And when they don't take enough time to recover properly, very often they have a reoccurrence of the incapacity that put them off work in the first place, and that circle goes round and round and round. What income protection does is it stops that wheel from turning. It takes care of the finances, and it delivers money on the table when they need it the most. So let's take a look at Bob. Bob is 28. He's the example I'm going to use in this webinar today. Bob's 28 and he goes off work sick with stress, but he still has bills to pay. So the question is, where could Bob possibly receive a replacement income from? And what we have here are just some of those possible replacement income sources. Now, we're going to talk about sick pay from work. Ask yourself the question, as an advisor, you've been talking to lots of clients over the last few months. What's the best version of sick pay from work that you've seen? Very often when I talk to advisors, it's something like a 6 months full pay, 6 months half pay. And that's pretty good. I think a company that actually sets up a sick pay arrangement that delivers something like full pay for half a year and then half pay for the next half a year, that's pretty good, because actually that's expensive for the company and it's a good benefit to have. But what we know as a life insurance company that pays claims is that on average, when people actually claim, they claim for a lot longer than that. State benefits, what do they look like? Now, I know advisors listening to this today might know some information about state benefits. The trouble with state benefits is very often that they're quite complicated. There are some places where you can actually receive information about a particular client to find out exactly what they could claim. But we're going to talk about some of the numbers in a second. And there is a common theme between each of them. And that is they're not going to support a real standard of living. If people have got enough money in the bank, in the savings, they could live off it if it's enough. Very often, people don't actually save for a rainy day. And when they do, they don't actually have enough money to last them for months and months and months of incapacity. And as we go down this list, you start to see some of these get a bit ridiculous. So we could cash in an investment if we've got one. We could remortgage the house, but is that going to be possible if you're in a position where you're off work sick? You could sell the house, I suppose, but do you want to sell the house? What does it look like if you actually have to go to your family and ask them for a favour? And what about your partner? Could the partner support? I mean, maybe that's actually a good solution if the partner's got enough income. You could possibly look for another job. And then we get into the silly because we're looking at payday loans and scratch cards. So let's take a look at state benefits. Now, what we do know to be true is that SSP, or statutory sick pay, this is a state benefit which is only available to employees. And to claim it, you need to be off work sick for 4 or more days in a row, and that includes non-working days. And the current benefit level in this current tax year is £94.25. That's payable for up to 28 weeks, or the best part of half a year. Now, if you look at this diagram here, the left-hand bar illustrates a £30,000 income and the take-home pay that you would achieve from that after tax and national insurance has been taken away. That's £460. If your income dropped to £94.25, statutory sick pay, that would actually represent an income drop of 80%. So I suppose the question straight away is, how are you going to manage on an income drop of 80%? Another benefit which does get quite complicated when we delve into it is employment and support allowance. Now, this is claimable by employees after they finish their statutory sick pay. But for self-employed people, they'd be looking to claim this a lot sooner because they're not entitled to statutory sick pay. Let's have a look at the numbers. The numbers are £73.10. That's for people who qualify for ESA and are put in what's called the work-related activity group. They'd receive a benefit of £73.10. And that figure represents an income drop of 84% based on the take-home pay from a £30,000 average salary. Now, the interesting thing here is that the figure that you would get from ESA in the work group is exactly the same as those who are claiming job seekers allowance. That's £73.10. So you're kind of in the same camp, really. You either claim ESA work-related activity group benefit at £73.10, or you look for another job and claim £73.10 a week. There is one other group I need to tell you about, which is ESA claimants qualifying for the support group. Those people actually get a supplement, and that is up to £111.65 a week. But we must stress, that's a 76% pay cut based on take-home pay from a £30,000 income, and it's very likely that the people in this group are never going to work ever again. They're very seriously incapacitated. Now, this diagram here is actually taken from the publication that the government put out every few months, and this page shows the work capability assessment, mandatory reconsiderations and the appeals for all claimants between October 2013 and June 2018. So this is some of the most recent data that we have. I don't want to get too heavy on this, but I want to pick out some really important numbers. The first one you can see there, how many people tried to claim ESA? And think about the workforce in the UK. the majority of people who work are actually employed. 4.1 million people tried to claim ESA between October 2013 and June 2018. And remember, you wouldn't start claiming this benefit if you were employed until your statutory sick pay had ended. So that's half a year. The other figure that I find quite interesting is that 62% of them completed the assessment. Now, look at the dates, October 2013 to June 2018, so it's the best part of 5 years. And just 62% of those applicants actually managed to complete the assessment. And more interestingly, if you look at the outcomes of those people who did complete the assessment, 37% of those people were actually deemed fit for work. So their benefits stopped and they got no more. 10% went into the work-related group and 53% of them went into the support group. Now, of course, if you've been told by your doctor you can't work and you've been receiving statutory sick pay and you apply for this benefit and are told you're fit for work, then you're very likely to go on and request what's called a mandatory reconsideration. And this is another look at the paperwork by the Department of Work and Pensions. Now, 15% of those people did actually go on to register a mandatory reconsideration in this period of time, and that is 370,000 people. So again, we're talking about big numbers. Now, the final box I want to show you is that there is another layer to the appeal process, and this is actually to go and have a tribunal appeal. Now, look at the numbers there. 63% of all those people who actually went on to appeal the decision, and presumably most of those decisions were that you were fit for work and your benefit stops, 63% of them actually had their decision overturned. That's 48,000 people. More than half of them had the decision overturned. So what does that tell you about the benefit system? You could probably draw your own conclusions, really, but it feels like it's not a particularly slick system. Not many people have actually managed to get through to the other side of it, and lots of people are found to be fit for work. Many of those people who are found fit for work do try and go through the mandatory reconsideration and then onto the appeal process, where what we've seen over the past 5 years or so, 63% of them had the decision overturned. Now, the government do publish this from time to time. All you need to do is go to Google and type in Work Capability Assessment Summary, and it should be quite near the top. And you'll be able to have a look through all of the experiences that people have gone through when they've tried to claim this particular benefit. Now, I think another really good little sales angle that you've got here is show people what the application form looks like. This is the current one. This is the application form for employment and support allowance. And what you can see on the slide there are 64 pages within this document, and 55 of them need to be filled in to support the claim. That's why it takes such a long time for people to get benefit, I would suspect. So let's take a look at savings. So what does it look like in terms of savings? Because savings is a good solution to the problem of income loss if you've got enough of them. Now, according to Money Advice Survey, 10.7 million adults in the UK, they rarely or they never save. And as an advisor, ask yourself whether that matches your experience of clients that you go to see. Now, 10.7 million is actually 21% of the population. It's nearly a quarter. And another statistic that was recently published was 53% of 22 to 29-year-olds, so you might call these the millennials, had no money saved in a savings account or an ISA between the years of 2014 and 2016. Now, if we talk about savings being a solution, I'm going to use the number of £5,000. I think that would be a representative of a decent level of savings that somebody might have stored away in their bank. But what we do know to be true is if we look at the average national salary for full-time workers, which is £30,000, that £5,000 would actually last about 10 weeks. Then it'd be all gone and there wouldn't be anything left. So let's say that somebody did earn the UK's average income of £30,000 and they had £5,000 savings in the bank and they lost their income through sickness. If their outgoings were £1,500 a month, is income replacement through savings any kind of viable solution? Well, on this chart here, what we've got is an illustration to show that in the first month, the claimant could live off their savings. In the second month, they can live off their savings. And in the third month, they've nearly used all of their savings up. And in the fourth month, they are actually starting to run into some kind of debt. all savings are depleted within the 4th month. So it's probably quite a good idea to illustrate that to your clients, because if people are sat on £5, £6, £10,000, then actually just show them what it looks like. And very often people actually have a different idea about what they actually wanted to have those savings for and how they were going to use them. Now, if you look at Income Protection's recent claim statistics, I alluded to this before, but Royal London's claim statistics do show that the average time for income protection claims, based on our whole book of income protection claims, is 9 years and 11 months. It's nearly 10 years. And that equates to the loss of 119 paydays. So again, the question is, savings are a great idea, but how long would they actually last? If you look at the types of claims that we've been paying when it comes to income protection, a third of them were down to what we would call musculoskeletal. So I'd say there's a lot of bad backs going on in there. It can lay people up for quite some time. Surprisingly, 20% of them were for cancer, and 13% of those claims were for mental health issues. So whether it's anxiety, depression, those sorts of things. 2% were heart attacks, and all the rest of the claims that we pay are for a variety of other conditions and reasons. The average age of income protection claims that we experience here at Royal London is that claimants tend to be, on average, 43 years of age. And another document that we published recently was our State of the Protection Nation, where we actually surveyed and spoke to over 2,000 people from the general public. They actually told us some pretty interesting things, because if you look at 18 to 35-year-olds, these are young singles, they're people who share homes together, or private renters, that category of people. 56% of that group said they would last less than 3 months on their savings and investments if they couldn't work due to illness or injury. So if you look at working renters, so people who actually rent property and have a private landlord, 62% of that group said that they wouldn't last 3 months financially if they couldn't work due to illness or injury. And this stat really does surprise me, but consumers have told us that they believe that they're almost twice as likely to die during their working life than to have an accident that prevents them from working. And they also think that they're more likely to die than to suffer a critical illness during their working lifetime. So I think this is why we have to put some reality into the conversation with our clients. Another statistic that we found was that a quarter of people who work, 22%, they felt that they could only survive financially for a month or less if their income stopped. So take a look at our State of the Protection Nation. It does give some fascinating insights, and we also did speak to advisors too to glean some of their opinions about the protection market as it stands today. So going back to our list of possible backup plans, we've talked about state benefits and we've talked about savings. Where else could Bob possibly receive a replacement income from? So once we've debunked all of these other possible places to receive a replacement income, there is only one place left to turn, and that is income protection. So let's talk about illustrating the chance of an actual claim. I think this should be in the process. I think we should talk about it. But how do we do it? How do we actually introduce something into our process where we can help our clients and illustrate the actual chance for them as an individual? Well, if you look at our State of the Protection Nation report, 11% of all of the consumers that we spoke to felt that they were likely to go off work sick for 3 months or more, just 11%. And only 14% thought they were likely to have an accident that meant they were unable to work. People don't see outside the bubble that they live in. They think that they're fit and well and healthy and don't see any prospect of going off work sick. The government data tells a different story, as well as life company data in terms of the payment of these types of income protection claims. So let's look at Bob again. Bob is a male, he's 28 next birthday, he doesn't smoke cigarettes, he earns the average income of £30,000, he'll probably work until age 70. He doesn't have any protection in place at the moment. So let's take a look at the risk and the chance that Bob would actually make a claim on a protection plan, so it could be anything, during his working lifetime. So as an advisor, what we need to do now, let's just imagine for a second that we have 100 clients like Bob on our client base. How many of them would actually die before their retirement age of 70? Well, in actual fact, it's 5. It's 5 in every 100 clients like Bob. We're predicted that 5% of that group would actually die before the age of 70. And that gives some indication why life insurance is predominantly quite an inexpensive product to purchase. So let's go back to the list again and look this time at how many of our clients would we expect to suffer a critical illness and then make a claim before their retirement age of 70. So 5 for death, it's actually 17. 17% of that group would be expected to make some form of critical illness claim and have some form of critical illness before the age of 70. Let's go back to our 100 again, and this time let's take a look at how many of our clients could we expect would go off work sick. And we're talking here about a period of 2 months or more, and that's before their retirement age, some point during their working lifetime before the age of 70. And that represents 37. So we could expect over their working lifetimes before the age of 70 that 37%, or 37 out of 100, would go off work sick for at least 2 months or more. And if they had income protection, they'd be looking to make a claim. How many of that same group of 28-year-old males would we expect to make any kind of protection claim before their retirement age of 70? What do you think? Well, it's actually a bigger number, and it's actually 50%. 50 of that 100, half of them, exactly half of them, we could predict would make some kind of claim during that working lifetime. And that's why we need to have that conversation about risk and probability, because knowing those numbers and knowing those statistics that are based on them as an individual could just help them understand what their priorities actually are. So in this illustration here, we're going to look at a different client. This one's called John, and he's a male smoker this time. We've just arranged a 30-year mortgage. How could we portray the chance of a claim for a mortgage client like John? Well, what we know is that for someone like John, there's a 5% chance that he would actually die during the mortgage term. There's a 13% chance that he would suffer some kind of critical illness that gives rise to a claim, and there's a 27%, which is more than a 1 in 4 chance, he'd go off work sick at some point during the term of his mortgage. And the chance that any of those things could happen to John, it's actually 39%. So the safe bet really is to have a little bit of all 3 of those areas covered by way of insurance. Now, you've probably seen this triangle, this pyramid, and that's taken from our marketing studio risk reports. Now, those take about 10 seconds for you to produce. The key thing you need to do, if you've not already done it, is get yourself registered for the marketing studio. You can see the URL at the bottom of the page, studio.royallondon.com. You enter your business details, your name and address, your email address, your URL if you've got a website, your phone numbers, your contact details, and all of that would actually be printed onto that report. In terms of making the report, once you set up, all you need to do is tell us the name of the client, how old the client is, when you plan to run the analysis to, do they smoke cigarettes, and then you press the button to create the report. And that can be emailed or it could be printed and used as part of your protection conversation. Now, if you register for the marketing studio, what you also get access to is a whole bunch of other marketing materials. Now, just from the report section of the marketing studio, you can see the risk reports that we've just spoken about, but in the middle, we've actually got the CI reports. So this is a detailed report. It's bespoke to the client and it's branded with your business identity, and it's all about critical illness. Now, of course, we're not really talking about critical illness today. So there's another one that deals with income protection, and it's full of talking points. What I like about these is they actually justify and show why the advice was good, why it was a good idea to do what you did in terms of taking the advice to buy income protection, or as it may be, critical illness cover as well. So do check them out. Have a look at them. They just make you look like a professional, and they're very quick to produce. I would say the CI and the IP reports, if the first one takes 10 seconds, the other 2 take about 20. There's about 4 more bits of data that you need to enter in to create the report. Now, I know that there's a lot of advisors on the webinar today, some of which are prolifically recommending protection, and some of you are actually quite new to it. Let me introduce you to a very simple 5-step process that will help you sell protection. Now, it could be income protection, but it could be any protection. So let's take a look. Number one, the first thing we should be doing is just explain at the very outset what a protection review or a protection audit is. Use words that the client understands. Explain what this is and explain what the purpose of this meeting today is. And we'll get onto that in a second. Next, we're going to find out what's important to them as a family. Why? Because those are all the things that are at risk should the worst happen. Should they die? Should they go off work sick? Should they get a critical illness? And then, number three, ask them how they would feel if they've just been paid for the last time. So you've been paid for the last time because you've just gone off work sick, or you've been paid for the last time because you've died, or you've been paid for the last time because you've been diagnosed with a critical illness. This translates to all areas of protection planning. Number four, we're going to talk about the risks that they face, the specific risks that they as an individual face. And number five, let's prioritise the needs that they want to address. So we're going to create the conditions here for the client to understand what this is all about and for them to want to take some kind of action. So let's take a look at number one. Number one, explain the purpose of this meeting today. Now you can use your own words. Think about the words that you shouldn't be saying as well as the words that you should. There are significant risks that you and your family could face financially, and that's why I need to have this conversation with you. So the purpose of this protection meeting today is to make sure that should the worst happen, that you and your family are able to keep your home and to maintain your lifestyle. And I've highlighted those in yellow. Those are the two objectives that I've got as a protection advisor, is to make sure that should the worst happen, so think about those words, that is something broad, it's not specific about one particular thing, that you and your family, I'm taking a guess that those are the people in your life that you care most about, that's yourself and your family, that you're able to keep your home, keep the family home. Now, of course, this could be off the back of, I've just arranged your mortgage. But also, it's more than that. It's actually be able to maintain your lifestyle. Now, everybody's got a different version of what lifestyle looks like, but you're going to be able to keep your home and maintain your lifestyle. How does that sound? That should be a good setup for what this is all about. That shows clearly what your objective is and what we're trying to achieve. So let's take a look at number two. The next thing we need to incorporate is to find out about what's important to them as a family. So explain to them, before I can advise you, I need to get to know you a bit more. So could you just tell me about you as a family? What do you like to do? Tell me what you enjoy. Tell me about the children. Now this is just conversation. This is taking an interest. Now I've got on the screen there just some of the things that people enjoy doing in their family life. So whether it be going on holiday, going out for a meal, things that the children like to do, their hobbies and sports and mini breaks and things they like to watch on television, going to the cinema. And some of these things could help you find some common ground and build a bit of a rapport between you and your client. But more importantly than that, what do all of these things actually tell you about the client? Well, what they tell you about the client are the things that are most important to them. And that's why this is an important conversation. These are all the things that we suspect they wouldn't want to lose should the worst ever happen. All we're going to do is deliver money on the table when they need it the most. And we're going to make sure they can maintain and continue that lifestyle. They've just described to you what their lifestyle looks like. And you can't get that by asking close questions. You need to use words like tell me, explain to me, just describe it. And they'll paint a picture for you that shows you and them a picture of their lifestyle. Number three, I think another important component here is it's decision time. To ask them how they would feel if they've just been paid for the last time. So if your income stopped yesterday, what would you want to happen to your lifestyle, your standard of living, and your ability to stay in this house? Now remember, they've just explained all these things that they like to do and they enjoy as a family. So ask them, what would you want to happen to those things if your income stopped yesterday? So it's already happened. Now, if you ask that question, what do you think the response would be? And why is this an important conversation? It's an important conversation because what we must appreciate as an advisor is that we have these conversations a lot with different people, but most people in the general public never think about these things. Meeting an advisor and having a proper conversation about protection risks is something that doesn't happen very often in a person's lifetime if you're not involved in financial services. So it's an important conversation because it gets the client to think. They can think about, well, what would I want to happen? And if the answer to that question was, I wouldn't want anything to happen, what are they telling you? What they're telling you is they need help. They need help, that if that happened, they wouldn't want to lose all of those things, all the things that they've just described to you. And most of those items on the previous page, they come with a price tag. You don't get those things for free. So number 4, let's talk about the risks that they actually face. Now, we've already alluded to this, but because you've painted a vivid picture of your lifestyle and your family's life, could you tell me the risks, though, that could affect your lifestyle in a negative way? Now think about that question for a second. Can the client answer that question? Is it reasonable to expect them to be able to answer it? So tell me about the things that could happen to affect your lifestyle, but in a negative way. Now I've put the word negative way in there because we don't want them to say to us, we could win the lottery, because actually that's very unlikely. So tell me the risks that could affect your lifestyle, but in a negative way. Now let's just say they say, well, I could be made redundant. I could go off work sick. And then they're pondering, is there anything else? Ask them what the worst thing is that could happen to affect your lifestyle. What's the worst thing you can think of? And the power of this is that you're helping the client to figure it out. Now, you could talk at your client, but it's not always going to help. Sometimes we need to facilitate and create the conditions for the client to get it. We want a light bulb moment so they understand it and get what this is all about. Now, if you've arranged a mortgage, there's another really useful way of positioning this. And you could explain that you'll remember that this statement appears on all mortgage key facts illustrations, and it also appears on the mortgage offer that I gave you just the other day. It says, your home is at risk if you don't keep up repayments on your mortgage or other loans secured on it. I'm sure you've seen that before. This becomes a great link to have that conversation about protection. But in the second part of this process, we need to have a conversation about what those risks are. And we need to find out whether there's something that we need to do. So what are the risks then that could potentially stop you from keeping up your mortgage repayments? And again, what we've got there, we've created the conditions where the client's got a bit of thinking time and they could figure it out. It's more powerful if it comes from them. And to help you, you can show them the risk pyramid that shows them what the risks are. So once they've told you that they could go off work sick or they could actually die, that's the worst thing that could happen, show them what the odds are and the chances for somebody just like you. And of course, you can tailor that specifically to your client or clients. Number 5, now we need to prioritize the needs that they want to address. So how do we do that? Well, so having had the conversation about all these possible different risk areas, which are the risks that you want to address first, and what's your priority, and in what order? Could we put them into some kind of order? Maybe we can't do everything today, but what are the things that are most important to you? What's your first priority? What this process allows you to do, on top of the normal fact-finding that takes place, is it just helps you have a conversation with the customer, and it helps you to help them to understand what this is all about. So there we go, a 5 simple step to sell protection process. Now, as we conclude, I just want to show you how to design an income protection solution on a very tight budget. And we're going to revisit this in the next webinar next week. Now, income protection has actually been a product that's been around for quite a long time. And there seems to have been a perception that this is quite expensive. And in fact, some of you on the webinar today might well agree with that this is an expensive proposition. So the question has to be, how much will income protection cost? Well, if we've got a couple of clients called Bob and Sue, and I'm going to use the same Bob from earlier. Bob's on the national average income of £30,000 a year, and Sue works part-time and earns £10,000 per annum. Now, we're going to say that they've got some savings and they don't have anything else beyond that, though, to replace their income in the event of sickness or incapacity during their working lifetime, other than state benefits. They've got a repayment mortgage, which is the reason that we're talking about protection. It's a £150,000 capital and interest repayment mortgage with a term of 25 years. Further to that, let's just say that we've had that conversation, we've showed them the risk pyramid, And having seen the likelihood of claim, they want to include some form of income protection, but they're worried that they won't be able to afford it. And the reason that they're worried, and the reason that maybe you're worried, is because they've got £25 to £30 to spend on all the protection that they need. So is it possible to do something that's decent and actually gets them on the ladder in terms of protection? So one of the biggest reasons why people take out any kind of protection is usually because they've taken out a mortgage first. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually put some joint life cover down. This is obviously for both of them. Both of them are insured on this, and it's decreasing because it matches the capital and interest mortgage, and it's 25 years. That matches the term of the mortgage, and you'll notice in brackets there it says the mortgage repayment guarantee, it says. So that means that regardless of what happens with interest rates in the future, that we simply guarantee to pay off the mortgage. Now that comes in at £8.03, and we did the quotes for this in August 2019. And now the question is, can we get decent quality IP for both Bob and Sue? Now, one of the problems that we have when you look at all the maximas available, if you look at Bob and Sue, now the maximum that he could have is a 42-year plan to age 70. It would be £18,000 worth of cover, index linked, in line with retail prices index I've chosen there. 4 weeks is my deferred period, the waiting period, how long they would have to live on their own means before the insurance companies start to pay them. And full term means if they never return to work ever again, we could effectively pay a claim until the end of the plan term, which is to age 70. Now, that's what we're going to put in place for Bob. And if we look at Sue, again, that would be the best version of income protection that you could do with Royal London. Now, how much do you think those would cost? So I'll give you a moment to think about it. But actually, if you quote on all the maximums, that becomes incredibly expensive. We've got £54.75 for him and £23.52 for her. Now, in the next webinar, we're going to talk about some dials that we can turn, how we can ask the right questions so we can actually fine-tune this to actually what's really important to the client. But what we'll do here is I'll just change this around a little bit. We'll just nudge this slightly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the term down to age 65, 37-year term for him and a 35-year term for her. That ties in with when they plan to retire. If we look at the amounts of cover, we're going to take it down for him from £18,000 down to £15,000 a year or £12.50 a month. And remember, that's tax-free income protection delivered every month. As far as Sue's concerned, we're actually going to keep it the same because she's on a low income, so we'll keep it at the maximum allowable. I want to keep the indexation because I think that's a pretty good feature to have, but I am going to take the waiting period up to 13 weeks. And if you remember the case study, they do actually have a little bit of savings, so that's going to form part of my recommendation to keep an emergency fund. The final little nudge that I'm going to make is I'm going to take it down to 5 years. So 5 years is 60 paydays. Of course, this is how insurance companies have been able to deliver effectively the same income protection at a much lower cost because a lot of the risk is mitigated. Remember, our claim statistics show that people are claiming for well over 9 years as an average. So if you look at those little changes that we've made, that brings the price down to, well, it's actually £16 for him and £9.96 for her. So that's a lot more in line with what they can afford. So let's go back to our drawing board, and we've got the life cover there. We're going to put in there the income protection for Bob and the income protection for Sue. And if you notice the bottom right hand corner, well, of course, we have exceeded the budget. Now, here's the thing with Royal London. One of the things that you'll notice about premiums that you quote when you do them individually, there is a plan fee on every individual quotation. And if you look at how much that is, it's £2.60 per plan. If we do this as a menu, so what I'm saying is we actually do the same cover, but we actually quote them all together. We put them on the same application form, so there doesn't need to be 3 application forms, 1 direct debit. And by subtracting 2 plan fees, this protection solution comes in at £29.56. Now, it's up to you to decide. Obviously, advice is a very subjective thing, but I think that looks pretty good. That's quite affordable for a couple of young first-time buyers. I've got them on the income protection ladder, but that's just one of the ways that we can help you here at Royal London. So we started by talking about the vicious circle. There's nothing we can do to stop people suffering bad things, but what we can do is we can stop that circle from going round and round by putting money on the table when they need it the most. With an income protection plan, it turns into the virtuous circle. And what happens is that people still go off work sick, but with income protection, they actually replace their income and they're able to pay the bills and they take the time that they need to recover and they're not burdened by any more financial headaches. They return to work when they're ready and they take the time to recover properly from the thing that put them off work in the first place. And we stop that cycle from going around. Now, some of you might have seen this, but just as a final sales idea, I wanted just to talk about self-employed people and how we can find the budget for self-employed clients. Because self-employed clients, arguably, the people who need income protection more than anybody else, because when they go off work sick, then there's nobody there left to pay them. So if you go to the Royal London Advisor website, that's advisor.royallondon.com, you need to click on the protection button, and this is the place from which you can download all sorts of forms and sales aids and literature and trust forms. If you look at the very top of the screen, there is an option for tools. So if you click on that, and then you'll find a variety of different tools for protection. Scroll down to the very bottom of the page and you'll see there the National Insurance Calculator. Now the way this works, if you open it up, it's very, very simple. You just enter in the name of the client and you enter in the net profit or their income and you press the calculate button. And what it does is it gives you a platform to have a conversation with a self-employed client. And you can say, right, these numbers here show an employed on the left-hand side and self-employed on the right-hand side. Did you know, Bob, that if you were employed, you would actually pay £935 a year more in national insurance? Now, the thing is, if you are employed, you actually get more benefits from the state. So a good example of this is statutory sick pay. You don't get that. You don't qualify for it. So you actually have a little rebate from the government. It's £935 based on your income of £45,000. What I'm suggesting is, because you don't have a backup plan, I'm suggesting that we use some of that saving from the government, that £935, and we buy the best solution that there is. It's called income protection, and it'll pay you if you can't do your own job, and it'll pay you for a lot longer than state benefits. It's just something that you can use to position the idea of protection with your clients. Okay, so here's the learning objectives I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. I hope we've managed to achieve each of these objectives. So that's it from me today. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye for now.